Andrew, you mentioned earlier the telephone gateway. How will that work?
Well, this is an idea that everybody who used to have civil legal aid advice for areas which still remain in scope now going forward will actually have the right to actually phone a telephone line and get some advice over the phone. And this will be the first port of call for most people seeking civil legal aid advice, except in emergency cases, but there's no definition of emergency cases at present.
And what are the problems of it?
I actually know this from a personal level because for a number of years I helped run a telephone advice scheme in Southampton, and this scheme was whereby people could phone in and get some legal advice over the telephone. There are some advantages to having such a scheme because it's the first port of call and people perhaps can get some basic advice and be pointed in the right direction as to where they should go after that. But telephone advice is not suitable for many people. And as a lawyer, as a solicitor, a number of years' experience, I know that generally I like to see a client, I like to go through documentation with the client and actually have the benefit of them being there with me so we can talk over issues, and sometimes we can isolate issues which the clients don't know are underlying or what the problems are. I'm actually very cynical about the telephone gateway because I think that the government are embarrassed by the fact that they're cutting so much of legal aid and taking so many areas out of scope. And I cynically think that they've looked very carefully at the European Convention of Human Rights, realise what they have to fund and what they don't have to fund. But then as a sop to members of Parliament who perhaps have some concerns, they're going to say, but we've got this wonderful telephone scheme that everybody can go to as their first port of call and get the same sort of advice as they used to be able to have in the past. And maybe I'm being cynical, but there could be something behind that. Another concern that I do have is that what you might find is that so many firms of solicitors are unviable because they're not taking the clients as they did in the normal way, that local access to justice, local ports of call for people to go, even in the emergency cases, which they say will still be available, not via the telephone gateway, they'll have no one to go to, and there could be a breakdown in legal aid services right the way through the country because of this. I'm very, very concerned about it. I know Richard thinks that there's one or two silver linings. I'm not so sure, but I'm sure that he might have something to comment on that.
So Richard, despite Andrew's reservations, what are those silver linings? What are the possible advantages of this approach?
Well, first of all, I should stress I do share Andrew's concerns that there are many clients for whom the telephone service simply will not be appropriate, and there are major problems with it. But if the government is determined to go down this route, I can see a number of possible benefits to solicitors that might come out of the system. First of all, for the last few years, solicitors have suffered with major problems relating to the number of matter starts granted to them under their contracts by the Legal Services Commission. And if you have a telephone gateway that is filtering out all but the cases that genuinely need to go to a solicitor, then in my view you would no longer need matter starts, so solicitors would be free to take on any clients who came through their doors. Secondly, it seems to me that it should be possible for the telephone service, as the first port of call, to undertake the means test. And if clients are referred to solicitors pre-approved on both merits and means, that would save a lot of unpaid administrative time that solicitors currently have to spend, and so that could lead to the system actually working more efficiently for solicitors. And the third point is that if many of the more simple and straightforward cases are handled by a telephone service, then it is likely that the average hourly rate that solicitors get paid for the work that does come their way will be higher, because either they will be the more complex cases that are about to go onto a legal aid certificate, or there may be just a small amount of work that needs to be done at the legal help level, which would mean that the fixed fee may be more beneficial in those cases as well. So it's quite possible that although a lot less work will be coming through to solicitors, that work will be paid on average at a slightly higher rate, making their businesses more economically viable.
I mean, another problem that I see, I take what Richard says, I still disagree, I don't think there's any benefits in it. But another problem that I can foresee is that somebody actually needs proper advice, and it's recognised that they need face-to-face advice from the telephone interview. Where do they go to? How do they get referred to a firm from there on? I mean, do they get referred to a chosen firm? Is there going to be a referral fee payable or anything like this? there's just no detail behind this. And I certainly think that if the government are thinking of actually going down this area more so, then they're going to have another consultation because there's so many gaps in this.